Hey everyone, this is Coach Phoenix.
And I'm Coach Gina.
And this is Toast with the Coaches. Cheers.
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 Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Perspective, the show where we drink and talk about life, the universe, and all that other jazz.
And again, I'm Coach Phoenix, founder and CEO of Role Model Life Coaching, where we focus on life transitions. At Role Model Life Coaching, we partner with our clients to help them navigate down the road of life towards their model self.
And who doesn't want to be their model self? I highly recommend Phoenix. And I am Coach Gina. I'm a certified life coach and founder of Clear Focus Coaching, where we specialize in boundaries coaching and women empowerment. For more information, check out clearfocuscoaching.com.
I highly recommend her. So at this time, I'd like to raise a toast. I raise a toast for a mentor, a former copywriter, a winner of multiple advertising awards, AdFad 32 under 32, and 2019 Minneapolis St. Paul's Journal 40 under 40, a fierce fertility warrior, Minneapolis owned Elyse Ash. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. How's your evening going?
Thank you for having me. It's been a lovely evening. We're, getting all ready for the season to change a little bit. So all sweatered out and cozy.
For sure. Absolutely. So as Phoenix likes to say, let's get right to it.
Let's get it. So, Elyse, can you tell the audience exactly what Fruitful Fertility really is and what you're all about?
Yeah, so Fruitful Fertility is a mentorship platform where we connect people who are struggling emotionally through infertility, miscarriage, IVF, and connect them with a fertility mentor is what we call them. So someone who's been through something similar and is now on the other side of that experience. They're there for you to help guide you along, be your sounding board, be the person when you just want to cry, you don't know what to do about some test results, you're really stressed out, you got in a fight with your partner. They're going to be there for you to help you through it. It is a lonely journey for 1 in 8 couples, and we are there to help support and guide through that emotional experience. Nice.
So is that only for females, or can male receive a mentor as well? And
anyone can sign up to receive a mentor. We have a whole bunch of mentors on call waiting. We have mostly women, I think primarily because women are more likely to raise their hand and ask for help. I don't think it's because men don't need it. I think it's because men oftentimes, especially in heterosexual relationships, might feel like they need to be the one to support their wife or their partner and they don't need help, which we've learned is totally not true. But it is an interesting dynamic, I think, in couples, especially when they're going through something really hard that oftentimes is a little bit harder physically on women. And there can be a lot more pressure on women to have kids. So I think in general, it's an interesting dynamic, but yeah, anyone can sign up.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that if there was a component when it comes to the females, because some of the females that I've spoken to who struggle with infertility often blame themselves. And I wonder if there was just a higher, probability on the side of females blaming themselves and needing that support.
Yeah, and it's an interesting statistic. So of all the infertility cases that there are, it's roughly the reason why is kind of divided equally among 3 different parts. 33% of the time, it's a female-related issue. So it could be either an egg issue, a uterus issue, a blocked tube. There's no shortage of issues that could happen with the woman's body. Another third is male-related, so sperm-related. That's one whole third. So a lot of times people are like, oh, it's the woman's issue, but it's just as often the man's issue. And then the other third is either a combination of the two or what we call unexplained infertility, which means everything looks good on paper, but nothing's happening. And so that can often be an incredibly difficult diagnosis for a couple because everything can look great, but you don't know why nothing's happening.
Yeah. So out of those 3 components, and I know most times when a couple can have a child, like you said, most people say, hey, it's the woman's fault. Is it primarily that first option or that first component, or is it each spread amongst the three?
It's spread among the three. And so it really just depends. Yeah. And sometimes you don't really know why. Sometimes it's a mixture of multiple things. Sometimes it's low sperm count and maybe the woman's eggs are lower quality. I mean, I think that's one of the frustrating parts of infertility when we talk about healthcare. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. And so there are a lot of questions. You can run all the tests, you can do everything and still not have answers. And I think that's really frustrating for people.
Yeah. Absolutely. And shout out to the professionals who are researching women's health, because I think that that's an area of health that has been severely overlooked, especially in our history. There has been a huge focus on men's health. And there's a lot unknown about women just because people don't research it.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Gina. I think sometimes we forget how much work there is still left to do because we take for granted how much we've done. It's like, oh my gosh, we have penicillin, we have all these treatments. Yeah. There are so many options. We're in such a great position, even than when we were 10 years ago, but there is still so much that we don't know. And a lot of those tests are on women of a certain age, of a certain weight. It's usually white women. So there are huge gaps in the healthcare system, especially when we're talking about fertility for sure.
Is it anything that a woman or anyone could do to be proactive? So when they're in their late 30s, they're not running into this problem?
Yeah, and I think something that people don't know about is it's not just an age thing. Like age definitely can impact fertility. So that's proven. But I think there are people who go through menopause when they're 26 and there's nothing that you could have done differently. There are men who've had issues with their sperm their whole life. And so while I think it's important to try to be proactive, I think there isn't always necessarily a way to know. There are some really great resources now. There's a company called Modern Fertility, which kind of works like 23andMe, where they send you a kit and you can kind of like, I don't know how they do it because I haven't done it myself, but I know they can test your AMH is what it's called for women, and it tests your egg reserve. And so they can give you some indicators of that, of some thyroid, of some hormone levels like your FSH, your TSH. There are some things they can test at home that might be, indicative of an issue, but everything could look normal. A lot of this stuff you don't really know. And even then you don't know until there's a really invasive test. Like a lot of these tests, you need to actually go in, you need an ultrasound. Some of the tests need to be on like a specific day of your cycle. And so
some of them are incredibly painful.
Are you thinking about the HSG test?
Yes, the HSG test. If you would like to.
So the HSG test, I think, is actually the most painful test that you can have. I mean, IVF and that whole process is a whole other thing, but you're actually under anesthesia for that. So you're not really awake when they're doing it. But the HSG test, they insert a dye into your vagina, into your uterus, and then they watch it kind of seep into your fallopian tubes to see if there's any blockages. The cramping is so intense. I remember when I was having that test done, I remember thinking, oh my God, how would I ever be pregnant? I can't even handle this like cramping pain for like 2 minutes. What are you doing? You can't do this.
Is it the equivalent of like contractions?
Yeah. Yes. It feels like contractions.
I would even testify worse that like when I had it done, I hyperventilated, like it hurt so bad. I have a high pain tolerance. I hyperventilated and I was like bawling by the end of it. And the nurses were holding my hand. And I was like, I can't have a baby if I can't even get through this. Like, how am I going to give birth if I can't get through this? And they like very kindly kind of chuckled and they're like, it's a pain with a purpose. It's different.
Oh, I like that. I've heard I feel like those appointments too, some of those early fertility appointments, you don't necessarily get the most empathetic technician sometimes. Like I've heard horror stories of people kind of saying the opposite. So I'm glad that they were able to hold space for you in that moment when you were so vulnerable.
Same.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, me too. So Elyse, question. What made you decide to, hey, let me start this company and mentor women with this fertility problem? Where did that come from?
Well, I like to call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I never wanted to start a company. I never thought I could. I never knew how to. I'm not very math oriented, and I always have been more creative. And so I never really was even called to like business classes or all of that. Just, I felt like, oh, tax is boring. Like it just sounded like a big math problem I didn't want to do. So I had a huge block to that. And I think, like so many stories, though, this kind of comes from a really personal place. So my whole career, I'd worked at ad agencies and I'd been a copywriter. So I'd been working on all different kinds of brands, everything from Target to small startups, helping them create copy, ads, commercials, casting different people, traveling, doing all kinds of fun stuff. I was very into my career. And I think like a lot of people knew I wanted to have kids, but it was kind of abstract. Like one day when we have our house and I pay off my loans and like one day.
Yeah.
And then eventually that day came where actually our best friends had announced they were expecting. And my husband and I went home from that dinner and I was being kind of quiet, which is not in my personality. He was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, this is going to sound kind of weird, but I feel like jealous. Like I'm feeling jealous of our friends. And he was like, "I feel the same way." I was like, "Really?" He was like, "Yeah." So like that night we were like, birth control gone. Like, and so that was our like.
Well, that night when y'all was like, birth control gone, let's get busy.
Yeah. Yes. And I think we really thought because of sex education, you're basically told like, don't even look at a boy or you will get pregnant. So I think we just had a very inappropriate expectation of how quickly things were going to happen. We were like, we're young-ish. We were early 30s. We were healthy.
Yeah.
We were like, what's so hard about this? Frogs do this. Teenagers do this. Should take like 2 months. Like we're good, right? Like let's start buying baby shit. Like we were pretty much already pregnant, like picking names. And it was fun to like fantasize and get excited about something. So first month, didn't get pregnant. Okay, that seems like normal. Second month, didn't get pregnant. This is kind of weird. Third month, what's happening? Which for everyone else listening, 3 months is not a long time to try to get pregnant. Like not at all. And really
unless I gotta stop you real quick, unless you're Phoenix, because I don't know what's wrong with me. In the past, since I was 17, I've been having kids, so I can't fucking stop. So I wish
you have the opposite problem. Yeah.
You are very fertile.
Yeah, hyper fertile.
I need to put a lid on it.
Yeah. So we were the opposite, where we were trying it like every day, every way. It was so intense. And it was like kind of fucking with our sex life too, because all of a sudden sex for pleasure and connection is different than like sex for purpose. When it's like, we need to achieve a mission. It needs to not necessarily like, we can't be 100% creative about stuff. Like there are sort of rules with this. And like, we need to have it on a timetable. And I think in general,
were y'all doing like, because I've seen this in movies, didn't experience this personally.
Yep.
But was y'all doing like, hey, I'm ovulating right now. I got to sit like this. All of that.
So like some of it, yeah, kind of like, so some of it, I think there is a little bit of like the movie suspense, right? Like you don't know the exact moment you're ovulating, but you can guess. There are some ovulation predictor kits you can buy, and there's some biological signs that tell you might be ovulating soon. And you have your apps and you kind of know it's maybe within a couple days.
Did y'all do that?
Yes, I was basically a scientist. Like, so 3 months was basically when I was like, okay, it's on. Like, download the apps, buy all the stuff, pee on the stick, do all the things, cut out gluten, cut out alcohol, cut out caffeine. It was like 100%. Any article I read on the internet that was like, maybe try like sprinkling matcha into your, I was like, basically a witch, like trying every single thing. It was so intense. And obviously this is not a very attractive trait in a partner either. I was like very intense, very needy, very scared because I felt like something's wrong with my body. And you get this fear like, oh my God, what if we can't have kids? What if something's wrong with me? What if my husband who always wanted kids, what if I can't give that to him? What if I can't do that for me? Like, what's even the point of being married if we're not going to have kids together? Is he going to leave me? Like you spiral really quickly.
So what Gina mentioned earlier, like most women take on the brunt of that problem. That's exactly what you did.
Oh yeah. Well, and I was basically like fertility chair where I felt like I had to learn everything and relay it back to him. I had to like do all the research. I bought all the books. I was basically like tutoring him. Like, here's how an egg drops down a fallopian tube. Like I basically became a 7th grade science teacher and was like teaching him all this stuff. I was like, how long are you sitting in your chair? You shouldn't be wearing that kind of underwear. Like, how long are you on the bike? Like I was just hyper vigilant because I thought like every little thing we did would matter so much.
How was that for him? Like, what was
terrible? He thought I was crazy, and then that created a really intense dynamic because I felt like he was negating and disqualifying all my feelings. So it was a really tense, terrible time in our marriage because I felt like, why aren't you taking this more seriously? Something's wrong. And he was like, Elyse, it's been 6 months. Like, we've had house plants longer. It's going to be okay. He knew he had friends who had taken them like a year or something. So he was like, why are we panicking? And he also was just more of a, there's no need to worry until there's a reason to worry. And I'm always worried. And so that's like the tension in our dynamic pretty much all the time, which usually works out well because I'm overcompensating one way. So when there is a reason to panic, I'm like, see, good thing I prepared and like packed all these snacks. I knew this flight was going to be delayed. And then he's always like, see, nothing happened. Told you so. You didn't need to worry. So usually
bring it down a notch.
Yeah. Usually works out. But in this case, it was very tense.
Yeah. And then it's in that tense situation. You're also trying to have that connection and have sex. And it's like, well, now I'm mad at you because you're not listening to me. Well, now I'm mad at you because you're being pushy. But
exactly. But if we don't have sex today, I'm not going to be able to try again. We'll have wasted this month and I won't have 30 more days until I can try again. And so that's the other thing about infertility is like, it's a lot of waiting. It takes forever. Like a woman's cycle, even if you have like a regular cycle of 28-day cycle, that's a whole month. And so if you're traveling or if you're in a fight or if you don't want to, or you're sick, like that can be really frustrating. So basically we were just really tense. It was stressful. And then about a year in of trying, they tell you that you should go and start getting tests if you've been trying for a year, if you're under the age of 35, or 6 months if you're over the age of 35. So that's like the window doctors give you, like, okay, try on your own, a year if you're under 35, 6 months if you're over 35. And if you don't get pregnant, then come in. So that's kind of the medical community's decision, I guess. Yeah. Unless you have something that's unless you have a red flag, like, you have PCOS or you have endometriosis or something like that.
So when do you tip into that category of qualifying as of infertile? Because I imagine like you try once, like that's not infertile. Like, so when do you tip into that category?
That's when you're diagnosed as infertile.
Got it.
Yeah.
After the test.
No, after you've been trying for a year under the age of 35 or 6 months over 35, then you're diagnosed as like infertile. I mean, they don't call it infertile, I don't think, but whatever they say. And that's when they'll start doing tests and they'll start figuring out, okay, why can't you get pregnant? And so that's when they'll start running all the different hormone tests and that lovely HSG test we were talking about and all different kinds of stuff to be able to start eliminating, because that's usually how you get to a medical diagnosis is, okay, we know it's not a thyroid issue. We know it's not an egg issue. We know it's not a sperm issue. Like what is the issue? So we'd spent a year fighting and it being really tense. I went to my OBGYN first. She asked me like 2 questions and was basically like, how are your cycles? Fine, normal, 28 days on the nose. Do you have painful periods? Not really. Okay, cool. Here, we're going to give you this prescription for a medication called Clomid. And we joke that Clomid's like the gateway drug to fertility medication because it's the easiest thing to do. They give you a pill. You take it, I think, 5 days, and it helps you release eggs, but you're not monitored or anything. So they don't know, like, is it working? How many eggs are you ovulating? What's going on? So we spent another 6 months trying the Clomid, no pregnancy, no positive, nothing. And by that time, you're really disheartened. You're like, okay, well, none of the easy, cheap stuff is working. And then you get scared because like the next step is like the expensive, intense step. So that's kind of when it starts getting real. So we went to a fertility clinic after that. So it had been a year and a half of trying. We went in, We had our appointment with our doctor. Yep.
I want to pause because what led up to going to the fertility specialist for you? And like, because I know that some people, they're like, well, do we try a year and then do IVF? Do we keep trying for the next 5 years? Like, kind of what was the decision for you of like, okay, now it's time for us, we're ready to go see a fertility specialist versus like, let's just keep trying?
I was feeling really anxious with the time. I think I was like 33 and I was feeling ready, and every day that went by was a day that I felt like was a day I couldn't get back. And so for me, I really felt ready. The day we decided, like, let's have kids was the day I was like, I'm ready, let's do it. So to me, I was kind of ready to do whatever it takes. Like, that was sort of my mentality. Like, I know I want to be a mom. I've always wanted to be a mom. And at that time in my life, it was hard too, because I had a lot of friends who were getting pregnant. And so socially, I was really struggling. And that was really the impetus for Fruitful. But I was really blowing up my friendships. Like, I had a huge falling out with my best friend, who was my maid of honor at my wedding. We totally threw our friendship in the trash. It could not survive.
Why is that? Because of your jealousy?
Yeah, because she told me she was pregnant in a way that I found insensitive and not helpful. And she never reached back out to see if I was okay. And I never reached back out to see how she was doing. And our whole friendship, I mean, we were friends since high school. I have not talked to her in 5 years. So that shit is real. Like, I mean, when you feel this intense sense of grief, you remember who was there for you. You remember who showed up and sat in the muck with you. And you remember who bailed. Like,
yeah. So can you talk about that? I want to get to continuing your story, but little divergence here. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the sensitivity around the topic that people may not know? Because I know, like, when it came to myself, my husband and I tried for around 2, a little bit over 2 before we got pregnant, 2 years. And so very similar experiences to yours, very similar, like, highs and lows of, yay, maybe we made a baby, and oh, never mind, we did not. Yay, maybe we made a baby. No, we did not, for 2 years. And it was, like you said, very difficult to talk to people, especially who had kids. They don't know what to say. Sometimes they mean well, sometimes they're just completely insensitive. But for people who do have friends who are struggling with infertility, what advice would you give to them?
I would say just listen to your friend and tell them that you're there for them. Ask them questions, you know, how are you? And I think not assuming they're going to like feel a certain way about something and just being able to hold space for them. I think I always felt like I was a burden, or like I was I was like people dreaded hanging out. Like I wasn't going to be fun. I was not fun, Elyse. And honestly, I was like not only not fun, I was making it really uncomfortable for everyone else. My husband, Brad, dreaded every social event because he knew that if one of our friends was like, surprise, I would start crying. Like he knew that that was like an instant awkward moment. Yeah. And that I wasn't going to be able to hide it.
Anything. You wouldn't go to baby showers or anything.
I would go begrudgingly. I would go and I would sit there and I'd be usually okay until like the opening the gifts was always the hardest part, where it was like the onesie that says like the initials of the whatever. Like, I don't know why. And different people have different triggers, of course. But yeah, for me, it was like the triggers were always ultrasound photos, like on social media. So when anyone would like show a photo of a baby, yeah, that was really hard. Any kind of like gender reveal, anything like the bump stuff. I mean, it's just so in your face. And then the expectation is for you to react in a certain way. So I think that's the pressure for an infertile person, is like people are watching you for your reaction. So you have to fake it if you're not in a good place. When you're in a good place, you can genuinely be happy for someone else. But when you're struggling, you have to all of a sudden like, oh my God, congratulations. Your voice goes up like 12 octaves. Like, where are you going to register?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I think
feel like
that's the
such
part
a
that's
jerk
so
if you
stressful.
don't. Yeah.
Totally. And I think it's hard in general for people to hold the space of like, I'm happy for you, but I'm sad for me. And I'm feeling these two conflicting things. And then I'm feeling guilty because I feel like a shitty friend. And I feel like a bad person that I can't celebrate with you, or I'm so self-absorbed, I'm so selfish. And you're like back and forth in your mind. And that's the hardest part, truly, is feeling like, how can I be there for my friend when it's like so painful for me to be there for them?
Yeah.
Nice. So going back to yours and Brad's story, so y'all get a fertility doctor, then what?
And then we finally got a diagnosis. We learned why I wasn't getting pregnant. And so I got a diagnosis of endometriosis, which means I have cysts on my ovaries. And so infertility is like a pretty common kind of like comorbidity of endometriosis. And I'll never forget like the day we found out my fertility doctor, they're called reproductive endocrinologists, is like the medical term. But my doctor said, she said, well, we have good news and bad news. The good news is we know why you're not getting pregnant. Because like I said earlier, like having an unexplained infertility diagnosis is also really hard to hear because they can't really do much other than just try like a bunch of stuff and see what sticks. So it was good that we had a reason, but it was bad that I had all of a sudden this chronic illness that I never knew I had. I was like 33 and I didn't know I had endometriosis. And it's a crazy disease because there's a really wide range of pain that women experience with endometriosis. It can show up really mild. It can show up really severe where women like opt to have like a full hysterectomy because it's so painful. So for me, I was like, I have what? Like trying to Google it, like so confused.
Have you experienced any of that pain?
So I kind of just thought it was normal. I mean, I kind of thought the pain was normal. They really teach you as a woman, like,
you feel like death.
That's just part of it. You're supposed to be on the bathroom floor, like writhing in pain. Like, no, you're not. And if you are, go to your doctor.
I want to pause and give a shout out and I'm a man. I can't go through half of the stuff that y'all go through. Having babies, not able to have babies, and everything else that comes with being a woman. So shout out to y'all. Cheers to women.
Thanks.
Thanks. Cheers to women.
Cheers to women.
Yeah, I similarly, again, at least our stories are very similar. I was also diagnosed with endometriosis because I got to the point where I was taking off work every single month because I was throwing up and in pain. That I was risking my job because I had this illness that I didn't know I had. And like you said, like it can present in different ways. For me, it was Phoenix, you're going to learn a lot about the female anatomy. So essentially, your uterus has.
I love the female anatomy.
Yeah, he has kids. He knows all about it. Yeah,
that's true. You've experienced the whole shebang. So essentially, when a woman has her period, when you ovulate, the egg goes into the uterus and the egg doesn't get fertilized, then your uterus, along with the egg and the lining, gets shed. And that's what a period is. So with endometriosis, for me, my type is the lining of the uterus has made its way into other parts of my body that it doesn't belong. And when I have my period, it freaks out and it's like, shit, we got to get out of here. The body's telling us, get out, get out, get out. And so it's trying to escape, but it can't. And then when the cycle is over, it's like, oh, never mind, we're good. And then it grows. And so you end up having this lining in other parts of your body and it just hurts really bad. So I had to have surgery to have it removed, but it also caused infertility issues down the road.
Yeah. And you can have it like in your colon, you can have it in your intestines, like it can pop up in other places outside of your uterus. So that's when it starts to get really painful. And yeah.
So you found this out, then what?
Then we were given the option of 2 different fertility treatments. So one is called an IUI, which stands for intrauterine insemination. And that one is kind of what we call the turkey baster method, which is basically when your fertility clinic tracks the woman's cycle. They see when you're going to ovulate. I think you're sometimes on some type of medication to help with ovulation. And then at the exact right time, like in the movies, they inject you with your partner's sperm. And so really
you gotta spank his fish to get that out.
Yep. And that's the joke too, is like for all these tests and all these invasive procedures that women have, for men, it's like, okay, go jerk off in this room right over here with your cup and it will take 4 minutes and then your part is over. Have a great day. And then women are like having to give themselves injections for like 6 months. So it's so uneven, the amount of work that goes into this and the types of tests and everything. So I think there is like a weird dynamic there too. And
which is why
the guy's there with his little cup and
I will advocate for that reason. If you do get pregnant and you do have a baby, for that reason, it's the man's responsibility for like at least the next year because like you've done so much work.
Yeah. Yep. That's how it works. From then on, it's even, right? Yeah.
It's yours.
Oh my gosh. So you can either do an IUI, and those are cheaper, they're less money, but they're less effective. And so basically all you're doing is you're timing ovulation, you're making sure the woman's ovulating, and you're giving the sperm a little bit of a head start. So that's kind of what an IUI is. You could also do IVF, which a lot of people know about from celebrities. IVF is a really, really expensive, invasive process. And basically what IVF is like Gina had mentioned, every month, a woman usually ovulates one egg. Sometimes she might ovulate two. That's how you get fraternal twins. But usually a woman will ovulate one egg per cycle. Well, when you're getting ready to do in vitro, they want to get as many eggs as possible. So they pump you full of meds. And this is the same for egg freezing too. They want to pump you full of as many meds as they can so they can get as many eggs as possible. And so this looks different for all different kinds of women. There are women I've heard who have an egg retrieval where they get like 30 eggs.
Yeah.
But for some people who have...
That's healthy, right? You get 30 to like 24 to 30. That's like really good.
That's like really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not like a normal... That's like a good job.
That sounds like a lot of... Like, do you know how many eggs a woman has? Because you're born with all of the eggs that you're going to have for your lifetime. It's not like you keep making them like sperm.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You essentially get 12 eggs a year because you get them every cycle, right?
Well, you give them out, but you have all of the eggs you're ever going to have inside of your ovaries your entire life.
That's hard-coded when you're in utero too.
Yeah.
That's like a cool biology thing. If you're pregnant with a girl, you're basically carrying your grandkids too.
What do you mean? Explain that. What is that? What do you mean?
Because girls are born with all their eggs that they'll ever have. They're developing their eggs while they're still in utero.
Oh, wow. So you carry yourself and your grandkids.
It's weird to like think about it like that.
No, yeah. I've never heard that in my life.
I know.
Wow.
Can I like caveat this whole conversation with like, I am not a doctor.
I'm not a doctor. I'm a mentor. Just saying.
I'm a fertility expert from a lot of Googling and experience, but please also consult with your physician with like all of this and like do your own research too. Like this is a casual conversation. Do not take any of this as medical advice. Okay. Yeah. I should have said that at the very beginning.
Good disclaimer. No, it's cool. Yes. So then 30 eggs is sounds like a lot, but like what's that in the grand scheme of
Okay.
eggs?
So the goal of one cycle of IVF. So let's say it's called the egg retrieval. They put you under anesthesia and they extract the eggs from your uterus or from your ovaries. And then what they do is they put them in little dishes and then they inject those eggs with your partner's sperm and they watch to see how they grow. So that an embryologist is a scientist who watches these cells grow and split and multiply, and they need to grow to be a certain size. Yeah. And so during this process, things really whittle down. So let's say you have a great egg retrieval and you get 20 eggs. Again, very, very good. Let's say you get 20. Of those 20, maybe only 15 fertilize with the sperm. So 5 immediately just aren't mature or they're not a good quality or the sperm they picked is a dud. Those go away. So you have 15 embryos to start with. Okay, well on day 3, 10 of them are still growing really well. 5 of them kind of like petered out and didn't look great. Okay, you have 10 embryos. Already we're down 20 eggs to 10 embryos. We've already like halved our chances. Okay, so then we want to make sure that embryo gets to a day 5 or day 6 growth. That's called the blastocyst. That's like the ideal perfect embryo that they're gonna want to transfer back into your uterus. And so let's say that 8 of them make it to this day 5 blastocyst. Okay, so you have 8 embryos left. That's really good. Now say you want to do genetic testing on those embryos because you want to make sure that they don't have any genetic abnormalities because those are more likely to result in miscarriage or they won't work. So you decide to do genetic testing. Okay, Now you have 4 genetically normal embryos to work with. Okay, now you transfer. So you can see how the numbers like really go down fast. All of a sudden you had a cycle that was 20 eggs. Now you're down to 4 embryos. So it's a really stressful, intense process.
So question, why, not most, but what I heard with individuals that does in vitro, they have like twins, triplets, quadruplets. Like that's very common. Why is that?
Yeah. And so they actually, doctors are like a lot more, they've gotten a lot better at preventing some of those like higher,
I know somebody had 4 kids doing that shit.
That's intense. And that is not responsible. So usually, some stuff happens. And if it's an IUI, it's like harder to control. Maybe if the woman is ovulating 4 eggs, like that could happen. But with IVF, the thing about IVF is science has gotten really good at it. And so they now are like pretty confident if you transfer a beautiful, genetically normal embryo that is grown to the right size, you're dealing with a woman whose uterus and lining looks great. There's no reason that anything would go wrong. There's probably like a 70% chance that it'll work. That's really high. And so I think back in the day, what they would do is they'd transfer multiple embryos. So rather than just put one in. Yes. So in case one didn't stick.
You have 4 or 5.
Right. But now what they've learned is when you have more embryos, it's higher risk. And so it's higher risk to the mom, it's higher risk to the babies. So they try to limit, they don't want you to transfer more than one. They will if you kind of insist, or if you don't do genetic testing, they'll let you transfer more than one. And I think it's different clinic to clinic. My clinic only lets you transfer 1 genetically normal embryo at a time because the success rates are so good.
Can you save the others that you don't use, or do you have to go through the process again?
No, so you can freeze them. And so that's the other thing with IVF is you can either do a fresh transfer, which is when you have your egg retrieval, you're waiting for the embryos, and then 5 days later, when they grow to the right size, they transfer one back. And so that is one way to do it. It's a cheaper option. If you want to do genetic testing, you have to freeze them because they need to freeze the embryo to do a biopsy to send that off to see if they're chromosomally normal. That's also when you can find out the gender if you want to find out.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Crazy.
I know when the vitro, can't you like basically Mr. Potato Head your baby? Like I wanted to have blue eyes and black skin and big feet and 6'3". Like, can't you like...
Not yet. I feel like the ethics of that would be, up for debate. But they can tell you the gender. I think maybe they might be getting into like some of that cool
gene editing.
Well, and the cool thing about this as well is like if you are a carrier for something like cystic fibrosis or some type of genetic abnormality, you can screen it out. Or if you're someone who might pass on the BRCA gene, like the breast cancer gene, there are ways that they can make sure that your future children don't have it. So
that's great.
It's cool. So there are definitely some like
isn't there like some splicing you can do too? Because I know that like same-sex couples who want to have a child that is biologically both of theirs, but it's you only have one chromosome or the other kind of thing. I think that they're advancing to the point where like 2 men can have a single child that is biologically theirs.
I haven't heard about that yet.
Okay.
But I know that a lot of times men in same-sex couples will sometimes put both of their sperm like so they don't know who the dad is. Like it could be either. For women, it's interesting too, because I've often heard of women in same-sex relationships where they use like one woman's egg, but the other woman carries the baby so that the baby can still be connected to both of them. So there are like a ton of different options. And then of course, when we talk about like frozen embryos too, we're also talking about what happens to the embryos that don't get used. Let's say in that same cycle, okay, you have your 4 frozen embryos. Let's say you transfer one and it works and you're pregnant and you have your baby. And then let's say 2 years later, you're like, oh, let's have another baby. So you go back to the freezer, you pop out one, that one worked too. Now you have 2 frozen embryos left, but you're all done with kids. You say, we have our 2, we're done, wrap it up. What are you going to do with those 2 embryos? And so that's a question that a lot of couples have to ask themselves is, do we want to use them all? Do we believe these embryos are babies? Do we believe these embryos are tissue? Like what is our belief system with the embryos?
You donate
That's when
them?
you can. And so that's something that's becoming very common too, is embryo adoption, embryo donation, where you can actually take the embryos that you've made and donate them to another couple so they don't have to go through the whole process of IVF. They can transfer one of your embryos.
For free.
No, it costs money, but but they don't have to do the egg retrieval and the whole waiting. Like, so it does save a bunch of money.
I was thinking, the reason why I asked is because this sounds like this is mostly like, it's like a class thing. So like the rich
yes.
or like middle class is able to benefit from this.
Yes.
But people who have like lower middle class or like that's in poverty, they just have to like suck it up.
It's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. It is totally inequitable. And especially when we're talking about like people having to pay out of pocket, a lot of insurance doesn't cover any of this. And so you have couples who are either going into extreme debt, doing kind of like fundraisers, unable to do it at all. So yeah, the inequity is extreme and it's horrible. And it makes me rage filled when I think about it for more than 8 seconds, because like Gina and I didn't choose to have endometriosis, but then you have somebody who like smokes and all of a sudden they have lung cancer and their surgery's covered. But like for me, my stuff isn't covered. So that's kind of bullshit. It's total bullshit. And I think also like when we talk about like who gets to have a baby, who deserves to have a baby. And then there are issues too, where like some women have issues carrying a baby. And so then you need a surrogate, you need a gestational carrier. And that's when it gets like crazy expensive. Like IVF's expensive, but like having a gestational carrier, that's when you get into the like, okay, only Kim Kardashian can basically do this, because a normal person, you can't spend like $100,000 to go through IVF and have a carrier and like fingers crossed everything like works out okay. Like who can do that? Yeah. So I know for time, but I definitely want you to finish your story. So y'all go through y'all went through IVF. We did IVF, yeah. So we skipped IUIs because we actually had really low odds of that working. So we went right to IVF. Our first round of IVF did not go very well. Remember, we're talking about egg retrieval. So I had 7 eggs, which was not very good. Yeah. So after all the meds, after everything, we got 2 embryos and they were both genetically abnormal. And so we didn't even have anything to transfer. We didn't even make it to an embryo transfer. So we were heartbroken and so upset. I mean, it's kind of like walking into a casino, betting $15,000 on one spin of roulette and losing the first round. You're like, well, now what? Like that was everything. And so for us, we talked a lot and I was pretty devastated. That was probably the lowest of the low. What year was this? I know. So at this point, it was what year from the time when you was envious and your husband was envious of that, of your friend telling you y'all was pregnant? It was 3 years later. It was 3 years later. Yeah. So then like they're getting ready to have another baby. You know what I mean? It's like time doesn't stop for anyone else. And you're like, everyone was lapping me. I felt like the slow kid in gym class. Like I was always the last kid to run the mile. And it felt like that. I was like, these people are already having like their 3rd kid. What the hell? So so we did decide to do a second round of IVF after some convincing that I needed. Actually, my mother-in-law was the one who was like, you would be really sad if you just gave up right now. And I was like, that's fair, even though I don't usually listen to you. Yeah. But I was like, that's fair. So we did do one more round. They changed some stuff with my meds, which is the other positive thing about doing multiple rounds. Is like your doctor can try different stuff. They can try different types of dosages. Like they can get a little more creative when they know what didn't work. So we did do a second round. That round went way better. So the first round I had 7 eggs. The second round I had 17. And so we were just in a better position. The numbers, we ended up having 3 genetically normal embryos. We did our first embryo transfer in June of 2017 and it worked. And she's now 2.5. Yeah. Our special science baby. We always say she was an A+ embryo. She's an A+ kid. She's our expensive science baby.
Is she an A+ blood type?
When she be bad at school, you'd be like, do you know how much you're worth?
Oh my God. Do you know how many times I've already almost said that? Like, do you have any idea how much money? Also, you can't go to college because we spent all that to make you. So
Yes.
you're welcome.
Yeah, kids are expensive.
If she were to go play outside, she'd bruise her knee. Like, you better protect that skin. You know how much that's worth.
Like, seriously.
You better not be talking bad about yourself at all.
I know.
Because I paid
I'm
for
like,
that.
let me tell you how much that tooth is worth, that eyebrow. Let's look over here. Yeah. So it does change your perspective, I think, on parenting. And it's been a wild ride, but it's really fun. And now that I'm kind of through the experience, like I'm really committed to giving back and to helping other people who are struggling and letting them know like they're not alone. There's so much to learn.
Back up. How did that come about? So you had your child, it was successful. When did
well, we started Fruitful before we knew that it was gonna work out. Like we started Fruitful while we were still in the process, because I was like, this shit's impossible. And I feel like the only people who get it or who I can talk to are other people who've gone through it and who know the language, who know what a frozen embryo transfer is, who know what this test is. Like, I found it so exhausting to try to like explain to everybody. It's basically having this conversation anytime you talk to anyone. Like, it's exhausting.
And so most people don't really advertise themselves either. So you're like, who of my friends are infertile? Like, it's something you don't talk about. Totally. So like, it's really isolating.
And you try to like find ways or like clues to see who, like, maybe you're like, oh, how long have you been married for? Do you have kids? Oh, that's kind of a long time. Okay. Like, you're trying to like sleuth out like who else gets it, who else has been there. And so my idea, I was like, oh, it'd be cool if you could basically have Alcoholics Anonymous for people struggling with infertility. So I have someone very close to me who's very involved in AA. And I always loved how that model is, you don't pair two people trying to get sober together. That would be a disaster. What you do is you pair someone who's like at the beginning of their process and their journey with someone who's been through something similar, isn't going to judge them, and can help guide and shepherd them, who has that perspective and has moved on from their trauma. So they get it, but they're not in it. And so that to me was like, oh my God, like a mentorship. That relationship is so important. And my husband is a software engineer and a developer. And I was like, someone should make this. He was like, we should make it. And so, yeah, we just built it ourselves and figured it out. And it's been a wild ride.
Nice.
So awesome. How has the experience of having gotten pregnant and now had a child changed your relationship with the community who is still experiencing infertility?
I think in general, there's always been a tension in the community with people who are trying to get pregnant, and then people who do get pregnant, and then people who move on to become parents, because obviously it's like you become each other's triggers kind of. And I think that it is kind of tough to find the right balance and the right way to show up. So for me, I still feel very connected to that community, but I'm definitely sensitive about like what I post about my daughter, what I don't post. I mean, on the Fruitful stuff, I don't post anything about my daughter, but even in my personal like Instagram, there are people from the community who follow me, and I'm just always really sensitive about like, is this really complainy? Would this have bothered me? Am I posting too much about my kid? And I don't know, I'm probably over analyzing some of that, but
no. And I mean, it makes sense because of what you've been through. So you're very empathetic to, couples who is experiencing this.
But you're also always going to piss someone off, right? Like you're always going to be triggering people. Happy. Totally. And something you post is always someone's going to be like, oh, she used that word, or she didn't say this thing, or whatever. So all you can do is be authentic to your story and learn and try to be as inclusive as possible and keep learning.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Is that for profit or is it a nonprofit, your organization?
It's a private company. So it's an LLC. But we just have a .org.
Okay. So how does that work? Does your mentors get paid? Because your mentors is actually like doing the work, right? Those like your employees or?
Well, they all volunteer their time. So if there's a one-time application processing fee is what we call it for our mentees. So, because we have people on our end who actually match people. So they're going through the applications, they're looking through our database, and they match people based on a bunch of stuff. So where you live, how old you are you religious? Do you believe everything happens for a reason? Are you in the military? Are you LGBTQ? What's your situation? Because we're going to match you based on those specific criteria. So your person can totally get it. But no, they're volunteers. I mean, that's kind of the craziest part is when I had this idea, a lot of the feedback I was getting was like, well, why would anyone sign up to be a mentor? It just sounds like a lot of work. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain trauma to you or sisterhood or like the desire to help somebody else and like be that light, be that hope, or be the person who someone needs to be like, you should go get tested. Because I think too often people wait too long and then you've lost 6 months, which really could have made a difference, especially if you're a woman and you're butting up against a clock. Like, it's important to go sooner. So I think it's been a really great program for a lot of people. Obviously, like, everyone's a volunteer and some people are awesome and some people are a little bit busy. So we try our best to match everyone based on all that.
So the mentor pays a one-time application fee. And
the mentee does. The mentee pays the application. Mentors don't pay anything. No.
Oh, nice. So that's how you generate revenue, is by the application fee. And then
and honestly, like, the application fee like barely even covers. Like, it's really lowly priced because I want it to be more accessible. I don't want to create a product that like not everyone can do. And honestly, if people sign up and they're like, I can't afford this, like, I'm happy to work with them, because that to me is the most important thing, is like getting people the emotional support they need, knowing that therapy is like so exorbitant, knowing that a lot of us don't feel comfortable confiding, maybe even on social media. So it's a really great, safe, private, one-on-one experience where you're talking to somebody who gets it. They're a peer, they speak your language, they get it. So that's really the benefit.
I like that.
I support the app because when I was going through trying to get pregnant and infertility, same, I hit that kind of 1 year mark and I was like, all right. And I started to get really disappointed. All of my friends were having babies. And so I signed up for the app to be a mentee. And it was really nice, like you said, to have somebody that I could talk to and be like, hey, this really sucks. Or, what should I expect from this procedure? Or, things like that too was really good to just have someone who wasn't a medical professional or someone who had a little bit more of a outside perspective to that. Like, I could say anything to them and it was like, they're not going to judge me because like they don't know me, but they also know what I'm going through. So it's kind of like this nice combination.
Yeah, that anonymity is kind of cool, where you're not going to run into them or they don't know your sister. Like, some of that stuff I found cool. Like, oh, my friend is putting me in touch with their friend who also had a miscarriage, like something like that. But it's cool to like not know anyone in common. You can just totally say whatever it is and they're going to be like, oh, that sucks, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's super awesome. So I know that the app is kind of ongoing and building, and that you're having more publicity and more mentorship and everything, that it's kind of taking off or has been taking off. Do you have more ideas that you're planning on implementing, or kind of what's next for you?
Yeah, we're looking to find ways to partner with fertility clinics and also insurance providers. So we're looking to find out, okay, what are ways that we can make this free for all of our users? Like, who should be the ones paying for this? Who are the people who are benefiting? And for me, I really believe it's the fertility clinics who are dealing with these patients who are stressed out, who are flooding their nurses' lines, asking all kinds of questions that could really easily be answered by not necessarily a medical professional. And also, I really think health insurance should be providing these types of emotional resources to people. When we talk about healthcare, it's not just the physical body, it's like the emotional, psychic part of your spiritual being as well. Like, it's all parts of you. It's the emotional component too. So how can we treat the whole person, not just like your ovaries?
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
Me too.
Man, that is a lot of information. I learned a lot. I know Phoenix learned a lot.
Now that I've overwhelmed everybody and stressed everybody out.
I think it's one of those this is one of those subjects that is not really spoke about. It's not really taught to kids in like high school. And people don't really run into it until it becomes a problem. So I think you provide a good format and baseline so people can have a better understanding and knowledge of infertility and resources and some type of out there for them.
And there are options. There's a lot of great, medications and procedures and things that can be done. You're not alone. Again, 1 in 8 couples go through this. So even if you feel alone, you're not. And if you think you don't know anyone who's been through this, you do. They're just not telling you. So in general, just be empathetic about what you say, be kind, don't give your cousin shit about like, when are you guys going to have kids? Not getting any younger. Like that doesn't help. So don't do that. And pretty much just don't ask people if or when they're going to have kids. Like just don't ever do that is my general advice.
Yeah. I think if you swap out the word kids for sex, like if you wouldn't ask somebody, hey, so like when's the next time you're going to have sex? If you won't ask them that question, don't ask them about when they're having kids or like what their timeline, like just don't do it. It's inappropriate.
So what about people like me? Because I would ask people like, yo, Gina, Elyse, like, when having sex? I'll ask that question.
Like what? I don't get what the problem is. Yeah.
Okay, well, like maybe a few people are like Phoenix, but in general, yeah, I think that there's like you said, there's a kind way to go about it, or even to Phoenix's point, having a sense of humor and trying to connect with somebody as well can be,
which is huge. I mean, infertility is really dark and the pain is really real, and so I think there is some gratitude and levity too, because it gets really heavy.
Absolutely.
So if there's that you would like to tell couples or women or even men, what would that be?
If you think something is wrong, even if you just have like an intuition, go follow up with that intuition. If you don't like your provider, if you're not connecting, if you don't think they're taking you seriously, find somebody else. You deserve to have a provider who you trust and who you believe in. So it's like dating. Find the right one for you is out there. And also just like, you're not being dramatic. There are big feelings. There's a lot of stuff going on. Best case scenario, you go in and they say, yeah, everything looks great. And you get pregnant the next month. So you're not overreacting. This is a big thing and you got this.
Yeah, I love it. It's funny because what you just said reminds me of people who are like, it takes a village to raise a child. And sometimes it takes a village to make one too.
Totally it does. Totally it does. I have chills when you said that, Gina, because it's like, it's true. It's like, you can't do it on your own. It's too big of a burden. And like that shame stuff will kill you. Like if you don't tell anyone, there was some statistic I saw that said 60% of women going through infertility don't tell anyone. Wow. No one should have to be able to go through this by themselves. Like that's awful. So find people you trust to talk to. It doesn't have to be some big PR announcement. You don't have to tell everyone. You don't have to tell everyone everything, but find one or two people who you really trust, who you can confide in, because this is heavy.
Or download your app.
Yeah.
A mentor so they can help you through that process. That's what I would say.
Oh, thanks, Phoenix.
Absolutely. Well, Elyse, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing not only your work that you're doing in the women's health sector, or the women's health area, but also for sharing your personal experience too, and for being vulnerable and helping to bring some normal to being able to have that conversation openly. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you both for all you're doing to help reduce the stigma of so many different mental health challenges, and for all the work that you do with your clients. I think it's so important for people to be their truest best selves. So thank you both.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue into my favorite part of the show. This is our thing we call the thing of the week. That's my favorite part of the show. During that thing of the week is when Coach Gina and I provide our audience with something to hold on to until the next time we see them, rather it be a book, a quote, a movie, anything that can uplift them and keep them going until the next time they see us. My thing of the week is this. Have you self-care lately? What do I mean? I mean, have you set out time for yourself? Rather it be a series that you wanted to watch that you didn't get around to, or to go get a mani and a pedi, which I need to do, or get groomed. Do something for yourself, not for your husband, not for your wife, not for your children, not for your family, but for you. Self-care is important, people. Take care of yourself. Coach Phoenix, role model mindset. Coach Gina?
I love that reminder. I think I needed it for myself because it's so easy to get just too busy and just kind of put things off to the side. So setting out that specific time for yourself is really important.
Absolutely.
So my thing of the week is a challenge to our listeners. This week, I want you to encourage one person each day for the upcoming week. Be it something as little as complimenting them. I like your shirt. I like your hair. You have a beautiful smile. Or something bigger like sending a handwritten letter to your grandmother or flowers to a friend who's feeling down. Whatever way you choose, find a way to make somebody smile and just bring a little bit more light to the world.
Nice. I accept your challenge, Coach Gina. So without further ado, thank you again, Elyse, for blessing us with your presence. Thank you for your dynamic story and the gem that you dropped on our audience. Thank you, audience, for joining us yet again. We love you. Hit that subscribe button, tell a friend and tell a friend. Hit that notification button so you know when the next episode is coming out. And until next week, Coach Gina, Coach Phoenix, Toast with the Coaches, and we out. Cheers.
Cheers.